Hi, everyone. Please settle in. We'll get started in just a minute. While we wait, please tell us where you're from in the comments. All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Trish, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. As we discuss, is your network ready for the future? This webinar is brought to you by Zayo and hosted by VIB. For today's session, it'll be roughly about 45 minutes, and remaining time we'll save for Q&A. Please be sure to use the Q&A box as we progress through today's presentation. And we ask that you ask any questions that you may have there throughout the presentation. Please talk to each other during the chat. We'll do our best to get to all the questions throughout the presentation and during the Q&A session, and we'll do a follow-up after. Today's speakers include Will Townsend from Moor Insight and Strategy, Jeff Wabik from DC BLOX, and Chaz Kramer from the Zayo team. Without further ado, let's kick it over to Will to get started.
All right, thank you, Trish. And Chaz and Jeff, before we get started, I want to set some context for our conversation. So there's no secret that there's a tremendous amount of economic uncertainty right now that's being driven by inflationary pressures, the geopolitical environment, and also we're just becoming more distributed with the adoption of hybrid work, exiting the pandemic, and just the adoption of edge to cloud within IT infrastructure. So the million-dollar question from my perspective is, what should businesses consider for their connectivity needs now, but more importantly, in the future as well? So with that, Jeff, I'd like to start with you. You manage customers on a daily basis, and things have really changed dramatically in the last couple of years. So what are you seeing as some of your customers' challenges today with respect to connectivity?
So first of all, thank you to Zayo and everybody involved for having me be part of this today. It's good to be here and to share the perspective and insights that we have at DC BLOX. We're a young company, and it's been a whirlwind for us, a whirlwind of excitement. We've got a lot of great things happening. So I'm excited to be here today to share some of that with you. We have a diversity of customers, right, that span every vertical and interestingly more geographically diverse than ever before. But the two things that come to mind immediately are, number one, more connectivity, right? It's the ocean, if you will, that floats all boats for us. And if you think about what we do as a data center provider, I think of folks in the world who have their IT gear sitting in their basement, and I always say that these are their children, right? It's the gear that keeps their business alive. And someday they wake up and decide they don't want their children living in their basement anymore. Maybe they just don't have to do it. Maybe they don't have reliable power. Maybe they're worried about a lease. Maybe who knows what it is, but there's always a series of reasons. So they give us their children, which is their IT gear. We keep it in a bunker. We keep it cold and safe and dry for them. And that's the first thought that they have is, I want my children out of my basement. I want them into your bunker instead so you can take care of them for me. But then they say, oops, if I'm going to do that, I've got to make sure that I have connectivity to it. It has to be high bandwidth, low latency, and bulletproof reliable, because I always need to talk to my children. I need to have access. So I'll stop the metaphor, right? But people need to have access to that gear from their ecosystem, whatever that means. And sometimes the ecosystem is a small customer down the street. Sometimes it's a multinational customer, and they need access to that from everywhere on the planet. And it has to be bulletproof. So we do everything that we can to make sure that we afford that connectivity to our customers. Sometimes we provide it with services that we buy from Zayo and others. Sometimes, we're carrier neutral, so our customers go off and they have a preferred carrier. Maybe it's Zayo, maybe it's somebody else, and they bring the services in, but we build that ecosystem for them. So, more customers need more and more all the time. They need access to the internet that's faster. They need private service between their ecosystem and ours that's faster, that's lower latency. They need connectivity that suits the application, right? And that's really the key. And that's what we've done at DC BLOX is we didn't just build a network and say, here you go, it's a network. We thought about what is the application, and the application that's the most important is the active application, right? Where I'm going to do, you can call it disaster recovery or disaster prevention, but I've got two servers that live in different spots. And if those things are farther apart than some single digit number of milliseconds, the active just doesn't work anymore, right? You can't stay in sync. So we build the network for the application that needs to be more bandwidth, lower latency, more reliability. And then the second thing on top of all that, and I've already kind of intimated what it is, but it's quality, right? The quality is the most important part. It can't go down. It can't ever go down. You know, mathematically, you can throw a lot of money at a network and sometimes make it more reliable and sometimes not. But everything we do with help from partners like Zayo and everybody else, right, is make sure that we at least have a 5 nines solution, right? That allows us 326 seconds of allowable downtime per year. And we really try to beat that. Many years we're at 100%. We have no downtime for our customers. So that's the goal is more and quality. And I think those are really the things from my perspective that make a difference for our customers and for us.
No, that makes perfect sense, Jeff. And I think as human beings, we're often satisfied with what we have today and that it's doing the job. And, you know, I spoke to some of the inflationary pressures. I mean, that's putting pressure on budgets, but I'm wondering, how do you have a conversation with a customer discussing ensuring future capacity? Because, you know, sometimes that requires investment and that sort of thing. So I'm curious, what sort of narrative do you use with customers to convince them that, you know, be prepared today for that future capacity for the future?
Yeah, well, I think they already know, right? I mean, I think we all have struggled through slow connectivity. I think we all have struggled through connectivity that has high jitter. I think we've all struggled through connectivity that is unreliable. You know, and anymore, you know, if your cell phone doesn't work, you kind of lose your mind, right? If internet at home goes down, you kind of lose your mind, right? You just suddenly don't know what to do anymore as humans. We become so dependent on this. So the conversation is less about trying to convince our customers and our partners to shore up the quality of their network. It's more a consultative conversation with them on what we think that they should do to make it real, to make it happen, right? And there's always budget constraints, but typically, you know, when we can sit back and say, you know, have you ever had this problem or this problem or this problem? They'll say, yes, we have. And I say, well, here's our proposed solution to that. This is how we would fix it. This is what we would do with geodiverse dark fiber connections that we will light at 100 gigs or 400 gigs or terabits or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And we'll make sure that there's no shared risk anywhere along the way. And we'll manage the whole thing, you know, whatever the story is, right? When you can sit down with them and say, here's my 30 years, 35, gosh, I'm getting old. See this gray hair? It's all because of you. But, you know, 35 years of doing this. And then, you know, people on the team that I have are all very seasoned and tenured as well. When they can see that experience and the experience, of course, that Zayo and others bring, right? And we can help them understand how to solve the problem. They're all about it, right? There's always bad budget battles. How are they going to free the money up? But they find a way, because at the end of the day, we're back to where we started, which is connectivity, access to your equipment, access to your information. That's, I don't want to say all that matters anymore. Family is the most important thing, right? Yeah. But after that, for business, access to your information is the most important thing. You don't have to sell them on the idea. You just have to show them how to make it real. And that's what we do.
Yeah. And I think you made an excellent point. You touched on the fact that, you know, it has to be ubiquitous. And from my perspective, it has to be as easy as the air that you breathe. It's got to be as easy as flipping a light switch, because connectivity is the lifeblood of business. You know, both the way that you internally manage your operations, as well as how you externally market your products or services to customers. So I thought that was a great point. I just wanted to kind of emphasize that. But Chaz, I'd like to move the conversation towards you. And I'm wondering, you know, what are some of the industry trends that Zayo is seeing that's driving the need for, you know, this bandwidth capacity, but also most importantly, resiliency? You know, Jeff touched on the fact that it has to be dependable. It has to be up 99.99% of the time, but would love to understand from your perspective, what sort of macro trends you're seeing in the market.
Yeah, I think you know, and before I get started as well, I also want to kind of thank everyone for brokering this this conversation, and once again, thanks again for Jeff joining from DC BLOX. Really, really appreciate everyone's time here. And then Will, kind of going into your question too, and I think most of us have seen this too, and I know there's papers on it, but I think the core three trends that are really driving that's just so much bandwidth demand is, and also this resiliency and reliability requirements is cloud adoption has been adopted at this point too. And it's more just how much do we need and how can we create those ecosystems of resiliency, latency as well? How can we have a private and hybrid cloud environment? How do I do a multi-cloud environment with multiple providers too? Where can I actually access an ecosystem that actually provides that multi-cloud connectivity too? Cloud is still booming, right? You look at the numbers that come out of AWS and Azure, and I mean they're growing quarter over quarter 40% on some of these metrics too. And these customers are also our partners as well, and we provide connectivity for them too. And just the amount of expansion they're doing from a fiber perspective is really kind of breathtaking as well. And then also, it's the basics too. It's we see a lot of demand from our carriers from a 5G perspective. Everyone's upgrading their towers to take on more of that backhaul connectivity, going back to their MSCs as well, trying to make sure that we actually have scalable capacity for a lot of that IP connectivity as well. And then, I think Jeff touched on it too. It's this disaggregation of networking. It's the unfolding of the edge too. And Jeff used a metaphor of my children in the basement, but I need them to move away, but I don't want to move them too far away too. Like how can they not be in my basement, but how can I can ensure that I have some connectivity to them that is that is quick, and it's for maybe me, and then also my grandparents as well, their grandparents as well. It's this idea of this unfolding of the edge, where I think it's hypercritical to understand how can I still have a distributed networking kind of platform, but also feel like it still is really close by too. And that comes with understanding how we actually can build resilient, reliable, and latency effective applications. And the key part that I think that really is really special to Zayo is we have 40,000 on-net buildings, right? I mean, those are locations where our customers connect into, where if they say we need to go from this market to this market, and I kind of need maybe something that's maybe not your tier 1 data center, but maybe your tier 2, tier 3, maybe my own enterprise building too. Zayo has connectivity into those places, which is why I think it's super critical that Zayo plays a really big partnership role with a company like DC BLOX in creating this overall ecosystem and platform that can allow a lot of this really hypercritical integration too. And then, when we talk about, resiliencies too, that's having multiple links in between your connections too. You're not going to be single threaded as well. You want to make sure that the fiber is owned and operated by someone that's reliable, which is once again, Zayo's kind of core North Star in terms of, we own 65% of our fiber plant at this point too. That means that we actually go all the way down to the basics of understanding our network and the performance. And then there's also things around capacity. I think Jeff kind of hit the nail on the head, which was, I think everybody wants more capacity and they see it. We still see, from a Zayo perspective, requests that come in where it's, hey, something happened that we didn't expect and we need capacity, not in 30 days, but we need capacity now. And how can Zayo actually effectively provide that capacity on demand as well? So it's creating an environment where we don't have, a capacity plan that actually says we can provide a certain amount of capacity, but it's going to take time to upgrade. It's, how can we actually build out a networking plan that allows our customers to actually scale in a manner that actually, it goes beyond just their own planning method too. Yeah. And then the last piece there too is just service delivery as well, which I think is a big key, which is it goes into how can you create an environment where we have keystroke delivery. It's even if it's 100 Gs, if it's a 400 G, there's things like that I think are super critical that we are kind of seeing in the industry, which Zayo is trying our darndest to actually start meeting those requirements from customers. How do we actually get in front of these demands? How can we actually be a partner and less of a vendor for our entire customer ecosystem?
I'm glad you touched on the 5G backhaul. There aren't a lot of people that, unless they're in the telecommunications industry or just in the network industry in general that understand this, but fiber is foundational to support these new 5G deployments. And 5G is going to touch all of us. I mean, fiber may not touch some of us. It may touch some of us in the home. Like I have fiber service in my home, but fiber is foundational with respect to getting that 5G network infrastructure deployed, and then all the disruptive use cases that are gonna come on top of that from both a consumer, but really, from my perspective, within the enterprise, especially in operational technology environments with manufacturing automation and private 5G, it's going to be really disruptive. But I'm wondering, Jeff, Chas took us through a bunch of different trends. Anything else that you can think of that's really sort of driving this appetite?
Well, I'm gonna circle back to something he said because it resonated with me, and it's something that we do, right? I call it a homogeneous service layer. So in my early rant, right, I talked about reliability and bandwidth and latency, and not to diminish the importance of it, but that's sort of plumbing, right? And we talk about fiber, so we plumb our ones and zeros optically, photonically across fiber. And then we do our best to make sure that they're geodiverse and there's no shared risk, and the plumbing is sacred, right? You got to have the plumbing. But after that, plumbing's not good enough, right? You need to have, and I call it a homogeneous service layer. Different folks call it different things. Some people throw in SDN, which I don't know if we're still using that acronym ever. It's still,
I still hear it occasionally.
I never used it. I never liked it, so I didn't use it. I don't know if other people are using it. But automation, right? So the homogeneous service layer means, all right, if I've got plumbing from me to you, well, right, my business, you're a customer, however you want to think about it, right? And I've got my diverse paths and whatnot. Well, what are you going to do with that? And we mentioned earlier that everybody's still in the cloud here. Most of our customers are hybrid customers. They look at their IT gear from 5 years ago, where they had all their children living in their basement, and they said, well, okay, children got to get out of the basement, but oh, look, as I start to move my applications, right? Nobody actually moves servers anymore, right? Well, I suppose a few people might, but generally you move the application. So as people start to move the applications, they're going to move it to us, and they say, well, do I really want that to run on hardware that I purchased from HP or Dell or whatever it is, and have it live in that building over there and pay for power? Or do I just want to shunt that one application off to AWS because I can? Maybe there's no wild security requirements. Maybe there's no legal or regulatory issues that prevent me from doing that. Different folks have different thresholds for the kind of things that they'll put into the public cloud. Some people won't put anything. Some people put everything. Most customers are in the middle, right? So when we have this plumbing in place between us, well, what am I going to do with it? Right? It's not just enough to say I've got plumbing between us, but I have to divide it up into pieces that can be used to service the applications. So for example, we'll take a chunk of that, right, virtually with software and say, all right, here's a VLAN, however you want to limit the space in the network, and say, this is now the chunk of bandwidth that you get to go to Amazon or Azure or Google or whatever it is, right? This is the chunk of that bandwidth that you're going to use to take internet transit. This is the chunk of that bandwidth that you're going to use to connect to your children that you put in our data center and have that private, it's a layer 2 VPN, right? So that private connectivity between the two things. So we'll create an NNI, for our customers. We'll put gear on site, we'll make an NNI, and we'll carve up that bandwidth however we need to. And we plumb it with dark fiber, hopefully, so we can light it at least at 100 gigs. People always say, why would you do that? 10's enough. It's like, you say that now, you're going to come back to me in 18 months and say 10 gigs is not enough. So we at least start at 100 gigs. Maybe we do 400. But then with my homogeneous service layer, which is all automated, I've got some of the best network engineers on the planet on the team, right? But the best network engineers still from time to time will fat finger some things, right? And screw up a config, maybe bring down the whole network. We can't have that, right? Quality is most important. So you can call it SDN, you can call it whatever you want. I prefer the word automation and the ability to make a homogeneous service layer that I can virtualize and take this plumbing and do what I need to do with it. And if a new service comes along tomorrow, I've got a new application, I've got the plumbing there, I've got the service layer, I can carve it up however I want, and it's type, go, and the network comes back and says, got it done. What do you need me to do next? So that to me is a big part of this. The word that I use around this is velocity, right? Our customers demand velocity. So everything I said before, high bandwidth, low latency, reliable, and then velocity, because everybody's turning on a dime anymore. Right? And everybody needs the new thing right now. And when you can say, I can have that configured for you in 30 seconds. They said, did you mean 30 days? I said, no, I meant 30 seconds. And that's a cool thing, right? And it really, it builds confidence with the customers. And then, we have a great partnership with them at that point.
Yeah, no, great insights, Jeff. And, I think of elasticity, right? Being able to flex, being able to be very highly agile, being able to, turn on a dime, like you said, do something in 30 minutes, not 30 days. But I've got a follow-up question for you, Jeff. And I mean, obviously you partner with a lot of different folks like Zayo to deliver your service.
Yep.
But I'm curious, what criteria did you use in selecting Zayo as your partner on a lot of this?
I'll take a step back. And I don't want to talk about any particular partner per se, because we partner with lots of folks. We need a strong ecosystem of partners. We're carrier neutral. We love all you guys. So when we need that strong ecosystem, and we use sort of everybody that we can. And sometimes it's the national providers, the international providers. We also have relationships with all of the local providers. In every market that we enter, which are typically underserved markets or second. I'll call it underserved markets in the Southeast United States. There's always a dark fiber provider, a smaller one, right? There's always a Metro Ethernet provider. Sometimes it's the utility company, right? They own the right of way. So what do? They snake fiber on it and they sell fiber. So we partner with all of these folks. And as I think about solving the problem for my customers, the first and foremost criteria is quality, right? So if I'm going to deliver this 5 nines network, if I can get, for example, diverse dark fiber from ALOC to ZLOC through Zayo, and I know that there's no shared risk along the way, that puts them into contention, right? I also enjoy being sometimes a partner diverse, right? So maybe a link from Zayo, maybe a link from Lumen, maybe a link from AT&T, maybe a link from Segra, one of those guys, right? Mm-hmm. It depends on what we're doing, but quality is the most important thing. I have to be able, and this is just me speaking about what I try to do for our customers, and for me, it's very personal. I want to go in and say, look, I have designed this for you. I've engineered this for you. You told me your problem. You told me where you are. You told me you wanted reliability. Here's the solution. I went to Zayo and I got 2 pairs of dark fiber. Here's the KMZ. Here's where they go. And here's what I'm going to do with it. Here's how I'm going to virtualize it. Here's how I'm going to make a homogeneous service layer. Here's how I'm going to provision it in an automated way with high velocity for you. Here's what I'm going to do. Here's how much it's going to cost you. Do you want to do it? Right. And most of the time they said yes. Right. So quality is the most important thing. And that's really it for me. I have to be able to go to my customer and feel that I am not lying to them. I want to go and say, this thing is going to be 5 nines for you. I built it for you. Trust me. And I can't screw that up. It's a personal pride thing, and it's a corporate mission thing. Yeah. But that's really it.
It's sort of like the old adage in real estate. It's all about location, location, location. In this instance, it's about quality, quality, quality. Yeah, Chaz, anything to add there?
Yeah, I'd say, it's all about network reach and where you are too, right? I can tell you why we're a big partner, Jeff, right? Is because we have fiber to a lot of places. We are the probably second largest fiber network in the US, probably the largest who's actually willing to sell fiber to most customers at this point too. So, what makes us a great partner for Jeff is because we have fiber to a lot of places he wants to go, right? And that means we can actually integrate be more of a partner in those places too. And because we're using our own fiber for a lot of that backbone connectivity too, is we can actually guarantee that quality, because we don't want our own services to be running on poor fiber as well. And then obviously, backhaul connectivity too, where we're making a large investment is key to that point as well.
Yeah, there are times when I think of an example right now, actually, where just in the last few months, for a customer, we deployed a span with Zayo dark fiber, and we deployed a second span to the customer using Zayo lit service, right? It was one of the ways we could achieve the goal for the customer, right? And then I put my homogeneous service layer on, because you're just plumbing to me at that point, right? But I put my service layer on top of it. So all options are on the table. And again, it's about understanding, and y'all do the same things, right? Understand what your customer wants. Listen more than you talk. Some people accuse me of the opposite once in a while, right? But listen more than you talk. Right? Understand what the problem is, solve the problem, and quality is really, it's really everything, right?
Yeah, for sure. And that's a great segue, Chaz, as we close the conversation. I understand that Zayo has recently made a number of enhancements to its network capabilities, and I was hoping you could share some of that information with our viewers today. Yeah,
and I know we put a lot of collateral marketing material out there too, so people might have a frame of reference as well. But I'll start baseline fiber kind of backbone connectivity as well. We have a very large fiber backbone network. That's a network where we are always investing, always building new unique routes into the ecosystem as well. We recently completed 3 of those routes. We're making further investments as well. And, the key there is, like I said, understanding the ecosystem, building to need as well, and also kind of forecasting where we know customers are going to want going in the future. And then layering on top of that backbone too is, we've made substantial investment in our waves and transport platform as well. We are putting 60 terabits across our primary routes on our backbone network. That's 400G enabled as well. It's dual vendor, which allows us to create express highways and also milk run routes too. So, if there's someone who wants to provide connectivity to more of a rural location, we can do that cost effectively. Or if you want to go just A to Z location between all the main pops, we can also do that quickly with pre-configured 100Gs as well. And also cost effective manner too. And then more broadly as well, which is, outside of kind of the macro long haul view, which is moving more into the metro piece, it's just getting our fiber plant in order. So there's a lot of hardy initiatives, making sure that we have good fiber, good splice cases. Our entire network talks to each other. So placing NIDs at the end too, so we can kind of talk and understand, just create a more resilient network for our customers, just to make sure that, we're doing our best to be the best plumbers of the internet, rather than just having the most pipes.
Yeah, and let me dovetail onto that too, right? So, and we all know this, it's the reason that we build geodiverse, redundant, fault-tolerant networks, is because that farmer with that backhoe, he's out there. He's out there right now. He's looking at that dirt. He's going, I'm gonna dig me a hole right there. He's out there, right? And in our network today, it varies. Some weeks we have 0, some weeks we have like 5 network events, right? And that farmer, he is out there doing his thing with his backhoe, and he didn't call locate to see if there's fiber there or not. Happens all the time. So the reason I bring that up is, operationally, right? We also need response time, right? We build networks that are usually single fault tolerant. I get at least 2 of everything. Sometimes I get 3, but generally I've got 2. And we have network events daily, right? There's something that goes on pretty much every day, and our customers never notice it, which is how it's supposed to be. But internally, you start getting a little sweaty, right? When there's an outage, the clock is ticking. When that fiber gets cut, when that farmer did his thing, he cut that fiber, the clock is ticking. If I have my second event at the same time, I can have an outage, right? So responsiveness operationally, when there is something that's gone wrong, is also critical to quality, right? We can't throw enough money at networks so that we get 75 paths to get there. Maybe they don't even exist, right? So we do the best we can. We try to balance economics and reliability, but at the operations side of the whole thing, and that's with Zayo and your NCC and our operations teams as well, right? And my network engineering team, right? You have to be there. You have to know that stuff is going to go sideways on you. And you have to be prepared with a real plan to jump on that. And candidly, to put right what once went wrong if you don't get it done in time, right? We've had outages, right? And it's not pretty. But then you have to find a way to make it right, because people, well, I said it earlier, right? We all kind of lose our minds when our connectivity goes down. So operations is the next important piece, right? It's always the next domino in the string.
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump on that too, right? Is, everyone has outages, right? We have fiber on similar routes as the other providers out there too. We know the challenges, right? And there's only a certain amount of resiliency you can solve with diverse and traverse routing options too. So it is all about making sure that you have a network that actually can at least kind of speak to our internal tools, right? If we have an outage, how quickly are we notified? Do we know exactly where it is? How quickly can we dispatch as well? And those are all things that Zayo is putting as part of our overall hardening initiatives too, which is how can we make a smarter network where we can fix issues that come up day in, day out. There was someone last year who was shooting squirrels off of a telephone pole, right? And they got the fiber that way. Like there's things that, we won't be able to stop, but it's going to be how quickly we can actually remediate instead.
Exactly.
Yeah. Great conversation, Chaz and Jeff. Well, we're going to leave some time at the end for some closing thoughts. But with that, I'd like to move into the Q&A section. And Trish, I understand that we have a question from the audience, and we may have a few more there. What do we have?
Yeah, well, so one person asked, what investments is Zayo making to ensure that its connectivity solutions are also highly secure?
Sure. I mean, I'll go down to, I mean, the most secure way you can have the solution is you have the underlying asset, which is fiber. So, I mean, Zayo has the easiest way to ensure security, which is if we have a dedicated fiber link to a customer, we can, at least from our standpoint, go end to end and know that the only way someone's going to access the network is they splice into it somehow, right? Which isn't going to happen. So from like a baseline security standpoint, that's something that we should easily be able to control from a fiber perspective. Kind of going up the stack too, we have, multiple kind of product offerings around dedicated internet and DDoS as well. I'd say, from a security standpoint too, we kind of look at, ways that we can create more protected services across the network too. So I think it kind of layers on to multiple product set more than anything else too. But the most critical piece is Zayo owning the fiber. It will always be the best way to have a highly secure solution.
Yeah. And Jeff, from your perspective, DC BLOX, I'm sure you're focused on security as well, right? As we become more disaggregated, just, people, places, and things, that increases the threat surface. So I'm sure you're doing things as well, right?
Absolutely. I'd probably just repeat everything Chaz just said, right?
Yeah.
The fiber is the most important thing. It is possible to tap into fiber and steal the photons, but it's non-trivial, and you got to dig up the fiber and find the strand, right, and put it through the little device that kind of spins it over so the photons leak out, right? So
yeah, the one strand of the 864 count or 432, right? Yeah, good luck.
And I always like to say, if somebody's willing to do that, right, get into your 864, find the one strand that's got the sensitive data on it, tap into it, and like, good for you. You deserve you deserve that information. Right. But there's a number of things we do, right? Just for us, the homogeneous service layer we have, we do it with carrier Ethernet, CN gear. We love the CN stuff. I think it's the best network gear on the planet. So we do carrier Ethernet, which allows us to do layer 2 VPNs for all of our customer services, right? And we do the NNIs on Zayo fiber or anybody else's fiber. There's it's tiered security. There's no such thing as one way to do it. You think about security in every single facet, including the people, right?
Yeah.
Spend some time working on ISO 27001, and the single point of failure in pretty much every security breach is always a human being.
Right. Yeah. It's the hygiene
person, right?
Yeah.
So people as well, background checks of the staff, right? It's all of those things together with a robust network infrastructure, reliable infrastructure. And then, we obviously tell people, if you're going to take internet connections, have a firewall, and you should manage it yourselves, not trust somebody else to do it. Right. Yeah. It's things like that. It's the full suite of a comprehensive security solution. And you have to think about that in advance, right? You don't just back end something. We do know some folks that would use sort of enterprise Ethernet switches to kind of do the same thing, because you can shunt the VLANs off, but you end up with broadcast domains where everybody can kind of see everybody's packets, and that just doesn't work, right? So yeah, it's comprehensive. It's by design. It's the staff. It's in the DNA. And if you're not designed that way with the DNA, it can get ugly, right?
Yeah, no, it's absolutely layered. I spent a lot of time with customers as well, and I think an average mid-market company is managing anywhere from 15 to 20 security point solutions. Yeah. If you're a large enterprise multinational, it's probably 40, 50, 60. Yeah. So it's definitely a layered approach. And you touched on a very important point as well. It's also about security hygiene, right? And users. So
well, and some of it's security training, right? I mean, a lot of folks, quite honestly, think, I got a firewall, I'm good.
Yeah.
turns out you're not, right? So encrypt your data when it's at rest. Make sure that you use at least SSL for every service, every connection that you have across your network, right? You got to use the 3DES encryption or SSL or something, right? Where yes, you could crack it, but it's going to take somebody 1,024 years to do it. It's not just about firewalls, and the folks who believe that, they're the ones that suffer the breaches. And we, there's certainly, and I'm sure it's the same with Zayo, and Chaz, you'll comment on it, right? But there's a consultative portion to our solutions, right? Which is, tell me what's broken. Well, let me tell you about the scars that I have on my body from when this happened the wrong way 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Let me show you those scars. Let's not do that again. And a big part of it's around security, of course.
Right.
And it's a big piece for mid-market companies too, right? Is, I mean, you have, some professionals who aren't quite as developed, who don't have the scars or haven't seen some of these things too. So it is far more consultative. Like we have to walk in these conversations, say, here's what you need to be thinking about up and down the stack. Here's how you provide all these things that you should care about, security included, and then making sure we're walking in and saying, here's what we can do as part of that too. And, if we can't do something, here's a good partner that can also help out, and at least in those additional pieces too.
Yeah, we absolutely do. We have partners that we refer to help people with security. We provide infrastructure and we do our best with that, and we secure everything that we do. But some folks, again, need the extra push. So we're delighted to work with other partners to make sure that there's other resources that people can bring in.
Yeah, great insights, guys. Trish, are there any other questions in the Q&A chat?
Well, I'm not seeing any on my end.
Okay, well, we'll give folks a few more minutes, but let's close with some final thoughts. Maybe Chaz, let's start with you. Any final thoughts you want to leave with our viewers?
I mean, trying to think through final thoughts, and I think we covered, a lot of topics too. I think the biggest thing that we kind of see too is proactive planning is probably the best way that we can at least attack at least a lot of these things that are kind of changing too, whether that is security, whether that's capacity, whether that's resiliency too. And I always challenge folks a lot of times too, when they say, you know what, we have room for, a solution. I'd say that's partially done too, is there is so much downstream value by building out a resilient solution rather than the overhead of having broader issues come into. If you have a network outage, there are downstream effects that affect you far beyond maybe your current OpEx budget right now too. Yeah. So I would always kind of recommend at this point going through of how can I build out a network similar to what Jeff kind of described too, which is resilient, has the appropriate redundancy, which is fast as well. And then is also scalable in the future too. So I think that's something that I really would want to kind of share with others at this point too, which is sometimes we see like, hey, we're going to do this one thing, and it feels like it's half baked at this point too, and I really would encourage people to take a deeper look to understand kind of what your internal needs are, and then also making sure the partner you have is someone that can kind of be a true partner in covering those critical goals that you have as well.
Sure. Jeff, same to you. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I'll say it this way. I have folks who ask me from time to time, what is a typical customer for you? And the answer is, there just isn't one. On the one hand, they're all companies or research organizations or universities, or whatever, places where people go and do interesting, important things, right? So on the one hand, they're kind of all the same, but the reality is that every customer we have is different. I would say that I've had to put a number on it, 85, 90% of the time we design a custom solution for a customer. There's always at least one knob. Sometimes there's 15 knobs and 36 levers, right? Just ability and configuration, right? But the key here, attention to detail, right? Something I said earlier, listen more than you talk. Everything we do is custom. The world is not a homogeneous place. I think we can all think about like watching Netflix on our phone, and that might be fairly consistent across, everybody in the way we do it in the user experience. But every customer is different, right? And attention to detail is what matters. So, for us, the experience that we have internally, the experience of our partners like Zayo that we can bring in, the infrastructure that we can use then to design quality, right? And we talked about what that is, so I'm not going to repeat myself, but design quality and make it the thing, make it the tool that solves the problem that one customer has, because they're all different. They all have different budgets, they all have different needs, different requirements, different security considerations, different legal and regulatory environments. And so I think that's the takeaway here for me is, right, the exciting part of this is that it's not all the same. I don't show up every day and just turn the crank and make another widget, and it's the same widget I made yesterday. I get to make, when I give a tour of our facilities, I often talk about the building is like a Lego toy. And I say, well, I've got a little block that's for power, and I've got a little block that's for connectivity, and I've got a little block that's for the physical structure, and then I've got a block for this and that and the other thing. And I make my toy with those components. And it turns out that every toy that I make, which is the solution, the toy is the solution for the customer, is different. And that attention to detail, building the right toy, listening to what the customers want. We do that for our customers, and we rely on our partners like Zayo to do that. And I think it's what really makes us differentiated and strong. And candidly, I think it's what makes our customers love us. And I really enjoy being able to do that.
Yeah, well, hence your name, DC BLOX. So I learned something new today about your company. So if we don't have any final questions, I'd like to thank both Chaz and Jeff. It's been a super insightful conversation. I also want to let our viewers know that Zayo is publishing a research brief that I actually authored that goes into a little more detail around the subject matter of today's webinar. So Trish, with that, I'm going to hand it back to you to close.
Awesome. And will you all be sending that out to them after this event? How can they
Yes.
get that hands on it?
There'll be a follow-up. I understand a follow-up email that will include a link for folks to download the paper.
Awesome. All right. Well, with that, we thank everyone for coming to today's session. We hope you enjoyed today's session. And for those of you who were VIB attendees, we thank you all for coming, and please look for your gift cards within the next 7 business days. And on that note, thanks everyone. Have a great afternoon. Thanks, Jeff, Chaz, Will. Thank you for a great session. Have a good day, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.